Let's pick it up where we left off on the tales of Colt's tiny Locke as he uncovers the mystery of the phantoms in tracking shadows. We just learned about the bold alliance for strategic espionage called Base, and we start with Chapter 2, Touching Base. Tiny deboarded the plane at the airstrip and shepherded Werner into a smoked platinum Alfa Romeo he had waiting in the lot. Since the start of the flight, Werner had flitted in and out of a zombified stupor, though he didn't appear capable of sleeping for more than a minute. Tiny figured that was due to PTSD. Tiny had tried to soothe the man's nerves and get him to focus on the good he was doing, rather than the hell he'd gone through. He wasn't sure if it worked or not. He wasn't exactly one for therapy or babysitting. Operations involving civilians were not Tiny's favorite. He had a propensity for action and hated the idea of friendlies getting caught in the line of fire. But protecting those who could not protect themselves was why he first joined the army all those years ago. What he did manage to get out of Werner, despite his state, was that he was doing a lot of good for himself. While on vacation from work as a nuclear scientist, Werner had been traveling around the rural regions of Afghanistan as part of a charitable group setting up schools for local kids. During one of these service trips, he was ambushed by armed insurgents who knocked him out, loaded him into a truck, and drove away. Until Tiny arrived, he didn't remember much else. After an uneventful drive to Kennedy Plaza in downtown Providence, Rhode Island, Tiny drove past several empty spots in the underground garage on his way down to sublevel 3. Pulling into a parking spot, Tiny turned to face the nuclear scientist sitting next to him, still clammed up and making a nasal humming sound while staring at the dashboard. "I'm going to lock the car and leave you in this garage for just a few minutes. You have to trust me. Then someone will take you to a hot meal and warm bed. You'll be back home in Germany in no time," Tiny said, placing his hand on Werner's shoulder to try to soothe him. Werner recoiled from Tiny's hand like it had burned him, then started shaking his head from side to side while getting louder with his humming. "You just have to trust me. I promise it'll all be over soon. It'll just be a terrible nightmare of a memory that you can move on from. Start thinking about what it would be like to hug your wife back in your home again," Tiny said. He opened his door and softly shut it while trying to make reassuring eye contact with Werner. He said, "Just a few minutes, that's all." Tiny stood up, locked the car, and walked from the elevator to a large non-discrete door marked Access Tunnel. He punched in the code to the combination lock, which with a beep, retracted to reveal a flat, black pad. Tiny placed his thumb on the pad until its outline turned green and the door cracked open. He walked down the tunnel until reaching a purple graffiti tag along the wall. Tiny placed his hand on the design, pushing in at several points until an entire plate of the wall impressed and slid inward to reveal an opening. The bright lights and stainless steel blinded Tiny every time. Headquarters for the Base organization, or Base HQ, as it was simply known, was a state-of-the-art intelligence, technology, and communications hub. Most agents entered the HQ through a non-discrete sales office for a consulting company called Silver Solutions in downtown Providence. Jupiter had the place outfitted with a couple of low-level agents and enough office equipment to convince curious onlookers that this was a respectable place to come in and book a project for your business. By keeping it as a business-to-business front, it would not draw too many pedestrians walking by, but it could still explain the presence of the office. Built into the back room of the office was a passage that led directly to the base command center. But Tiny never liked that way in, especially on his way back from a mission and with his high-value asset in tow. Tiny did not want a chance being seen. That meant the secret entrance was used only in the most pressing circumstances. The delicate nature of hiding the recovery of a rescued nuclear scientist qualified as such a circumstance. Given his profession and where he was kidnapped, the face of the German had been plastered along TV screens and newspapers alike, and Base had to preserve its anonymity. The few times a Base operation had been observed or reported on, the attribution of the actions tend to go from some form of United States Black Ops, whether the media would claim it was CIA, military, or another kind of operation. It was always purported to be one of the country's deadly and secretive special forces units. Jupiter liked it that way. The central hub of Base HQ was flooded with conversation and typing hands. Only Jupiter knew how many agents were stationed across the globe or even in the building. While Tiny didn't know the exact head count, despite his efforts to pry the number out of Jupiter, he estimated there were around 60 on this site at any one time, even some agents overnight. This HQ never slept. Everything at Base HQ ran along with the precision of an air traffic control station. Support agents lined the area in offices, liaison with agents worldwide completing their missions. The interior of the building looked like it arrived from the future. The central room had rows of computer terminals and screens, which reminded Tiny of an updated version of NASA's Mission Control from the movie Apollo 13. Rooms and offices could be found along every wall and every corner of the place, with their own assorted cameras, screens, and computers. Tiny strolled past an office with a support officer who had brought up a hologram of a field agent so the agent could transmit the surroundings from her current location. He went back to the central room where Jupiter's office lay. Jupiter had a spacious place in the heart of the HQ. It was accessible for all agents and support personnel in case he was needed. Tiny stood in the antechamber and granted Miss Highcastle. Standing at a petite 5 feet, Ms. Highcastle was young and attractive, but not to be messed with. Her fit and shapely body was not too muscular, complementing her soft and pleasant face. The charming ball of energy had moved up the ranks in base from a support role to a recent appointment as chief of staff for Jupiter. She liked to flirt, and it was one of the few times on this planet when Tiny felt sheepish. "There's my knight in shining armor," Miss Highcastle said, eyeing the sand and grime still clinging to Tiny from his trip to the desert. "I've heard you brought us a lovely present just in time for the holidays." Tiny asked to see Jupiter, who was just finishing a call with Interpol. A few minutes later, Tiny was standing in his boss's office, admiring the historic artifacts Jupiter collected. He never grew tired of seeing them. Jupiter was a tall, bulky, gruff guy, bald but with a tightly groomed beard. Dressed in a designer suit that probably cost a few months of Tiny's rent, the only contrast to this clean-cut appearance was the massive mitts coming out of his cuffs, wholly covered in differing patterns of tattoos. I really ought to ask him what those tattoos mean. They've got to mean something, don't they? Have I ever seen Jupiter's arms exposed? Does the ink climb all the way up his sleeves? Not much was known about Jupiter, or what led him to start base, but he commanded near universal respect and admiration from his agents and support staff. "Where is our scientist friend, Tiny?" Jupiter interrupted Tiny's wandering mind as Tiny jolted and returned Jupiter's searching stare. "He's in my car. I figured we'd have an agent go get him ready for whatever's next for him." Jupiter's eyes widened and his mouth narrowed to a small slit. He seemed to be clenching his teeth. In a forceful bellow, Jupiter erupted. "What?" Jupiter lowered his voice from that bellow to an angry whisper, perhaps trying to keep the conversation discreet. Still, Tiny guessed that Miss Highcastle and others nearby could still at least hear some of the fury unleashed in the office. "You left a civilian just kidnapped and beaten by terrorists in an underground garage alone before he's even been seen by a doctor or debriefed?" Hearing out loud made Tiny feel a sting of shame. He tried to avoid making eye contact with his chief and struggled to think of something soothing to say. He knew it was taking too long to respond, but still couldn't think of anything. Finally, out of desperation, he had to say something. "I made sure it's locked," Tiny trailed off as he realized the inadequacy of his response. Jupiter burned holes straight through Tiny's head as he shook his head slowly from one side to another. "Give me your keys," Jupiter said as he stretched out one of his giant hands. Tiny, uncomfortable and embarrassed, placed the keys in his hand. He watched as Jupiter took a few steps outside the office and yelled, "Mercury, I need you." As if materializing from air, a tall, lean woman with close-cropped auburn hair stepped forward a few minutes later. "What can I do for you, boss?" "Go outside the tunnel entrance to the silver Alfa Romeo parked nearby. The passenger in the car is our missing nuclear scientist from the recent mission in Iran. Tell him we will take him to the CIA, where he will be treated and debriefed before returning to Germany. See if he needs anything else before we hand him off to our partners. And please handle him with care. This man's been through a lot." As he said the last sentence, he turned towards Tiny and stared daggers at him through the open office door. Then he dropped the keys in Mercury's open hand. Jupiter took 2 long strides to re-enter his office and swung the door shut with a thud. He then sat and pointed the chair for Tiny to sit. "Mercury will see that our scientist gets to the CIA, and we receive our payment. What happened over there?" Tiny took a seat, though he grimaced as he did. "It was a clean job, for the most part. I got to the camp in and out with no detection from any civilians, let alone causing any civilian casualties. The scum in the camp had no idea what hit them, and I put most of them out of their misery before they could cause any more harm or get away." Tiny stopped to let Jupiter jump in if he wanted to respond to the report, but seeing the silent stare from the other seat, Tiny continued. "Well, actually, I guess all of them ate dirt by the end of my visit. I'm sorry I couldn't keep the prophet alive. I took a knife in the side and I think it must have clouded my thinking. When I saw him flash a blade, I didn't think it through and I just pumped him full of hot lead." Tiny paused in case Jupiter reacted to any of this. Silent stare. Again. Tiny shifted a little in his seat and finished his report. "I got some documents. Most of it looks like illegible crap, but I figure the intelligence analysts may find something. I couldn't find out why they captured the scientist, though. Nothing official, at least. I know these Al-Ruya terrorists love to get their hands on skilled talent, usually to sell to the highest bidder. I'm guessing they were looking to beef up the science and technology of another rogue state to help them build weapons to destroy the infidels, or whatever the official motto is. Enter nuclear scientist." Jupiter did not seem impressed or amused. "A lovely theory. For a theory, it's not bad. It at least shows you've done your homework on the Al-Ruya extremists. What about facts? Did you find anything concrete at the camp?" "Yeah, I mentioned a little about this briefly on the flight back, but one thing I found on the prophet's body was paper that looked like a weapons order from some group called the Phantoms. While prisoner, Warner said he heard them mention that name in a mirror manner. Were you guys able to find anything out about these Phantoms?" Tiny asked. "Yes, we've heard of them. There's a lot of chatter in the intelligence community about this upstart underworld organization. The Phantoms seem to be a decentralized network across the international landscape that has orchestrated and facilitated illegal operations across the globe. Their hands are on all sorts of enterprises," Jupiter said. "Ah, okay, so they're looking to be real heavy hitters, just the kind of guys I like to teach a lesson. Anything else you know from this chatter you're hearing?" "There seems to be 2 components to the Phantoms, an outer and an inner ring. In the outer ring, they have relationships and communications with many leaders of the criminal underworld across the globe. They are dipping their fingers in all sorts of illegal activity, as long as it pays. The inner ring is the command center of the organization. They orchestrate multilateral operations between different alphas within their criminal network. Alpha was used throughout base to describe a key decision maker. While not exclusively criminals, the term often referred to the head figure in an independent criminal organization or enterprise. Jupiter continued, "Nice work with that find about Mirror Manor too. As you were coming in, I was speaking with Interpol. They seem to suspect that a major operation is starting to take shape with these phantoms. One unconfirmed source mentioned that this operation or event being planned is called, or located at, Mirror Manor, somewhere in the Middle East. There was confusion if that was even the name or if the informant was reliable, but I'll let them know that you heard the same thing, albeit with less context." Tiny finally relaxed in his chair at the approval of his boss. He had been strung tight since his first told Jupiter that Werner was in his car. "I can breathe again without worrying my ass will get chewed out. For now." "Thanks, boss. Do we know anything else about his Mirror Manor from that source or anywhere else?" "Not much yet. The details of where or when it will occur or anything else are slim, but we know that we need to find out. We could use some eyes looking into the phantoms, and we both know that you'd be perfect for this job. These guys are tricky. They know how to avoid the spotlight, and all we've been able to learn about them so far is through random chatter from secondhand sources. Do you or any of our other partners analysts have leads on where to find a member of these phantoms?" Tiny said. "You know I'll take the job. I'm just thinking through the right way to start." "No, we searched all our intelligence and open sources for any information on the phantoms and Mirror Manor. The only thing that hit is some rehab center named Mirror Manor in the tropics. You're starting with this one with a blank slate." Tiny put his hand to his face and thought for a moment. "Let me talk to Jordan. The government may be sitting on something more, but getting them to give up intelligence in any decent amount of time and without jumping through hoops is like pulling teeth. Me and Jordan go back to the army days. She'll always do me a favor." "Get those teeth however you can. I just want more information on the phantoms and how you plan on stopping them," Jupiter said. "She always knows the smarter and quicker way to do things, and the best part is the teeth can remain where they are," Tiny said with a grin and laughed, which felt like an electric shock sent through the wound in his side. Tiny met Jordan Turner when they were students at the United States Military Academy, or West Point, and they've been friends ever since, studying, training, and serving together. Tiny still remembered their days struggling at West Point, where they learned to fight and lead, to face fear and not flinch, and eventually to assume positions of command in the U.S. Army. Jordan had been an invaluable resource and a friend who remained close even when he left to join base, and her support helped lead him to reach the heights he stood at now. It looked like Tiny was headed to Washington, D.C. to see her again. "Get that wound seen to," Jupiter said, as Tiny left the office.